Hi, and welcome to the SME Data Podcast. I'm Helen Ward from Data Cubed, and we're really lucky to be joined by Simon Haddo of Rethink today. So, Simon, do you want to just take a moment just to introduce yourself and tell us what Rethink do?
Sure. Hi, Helen. Thanks for having me on.
No problems.
Yeah, at Rethink, so we help lots of organisations across the world in terms of looking at their productivity journey. So we do lots of measurements in, let's say, retail environments, hospitality environments, looking at how long things take in terms of the processes that are performed, how they stack up against our benchmark data that we've gathered over the last 10 years, and then what opportunity that drives for either process improvement to make sure you can serve maybe more customers in the same time, or that you might need less colleagues to perform that work so you can save some budget costs and automate some of that process with machines or different types of technology that's out there in the market.
Great. So you've got a huge interest in data already, it seems, and that's a huge part of driving the recommendations for your clients. How do you sort of manage that balance with data and other influences when making those recommendations?
A lot of our information is very data driven because we spend lots of time on site gathering that data, formatting that data to look at cuts by different maybe locations, different time of day, different day of week, different groupings of locations. So let's say a retail park versus a high street versus a regional big shopping centre. So very, very data driven, but then we also bring an element from all our team that are on site studying of real life observations. So there's some things that data tells a really good story with. There's other things where a photo or some narrative around that actually brings it to life and adds some colour.
Okay. So could you give me maybe a couple of examples of questions that customers ask you? What problems do they come to you with?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting our industry because people have lots of information in their business around things that are important. So if you think of costs in a big retail business, it will typically be people. They're a big cost, and property. There's loads of information about property and rent and all those other things that sit in a store if we focus on retail, so all the equipment, all the stock. But actually what the people do, other than I know I've got this much money to spend on people and we think they're going to be working these days, how productive they are, what types of things they do, what things they could do quicker, smarter. There's very limited data in lots of organizations on that. Down to the point of, if you ask even some of the biggest companies you'll see in the high street in the UK now, how much time do you actually spend with customers? They'll struggle to answer it. So we bring some really nice snapshots and insights into that world of, well, you spent this much money training people, educating people, but you spend twice as long doing things as you do with customers. So there's some real eye-opening stats that start to come through when you start to get into the world of kind of productivity metrics and data.
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned gaps there being sort of one of the key issues. Can you expand on that and sort of tell us what the key challenges are that you face with taking that example of understanding how productive your workforce are? What sort of other challenges that you face in trying to get a clear, reliable picture?
Consistency. So people doing the same things or doing different things, or things they're not supposed to do, or things that another role should do. So again, if we focus in on retail, the holy grail in retail is compliance and consistency. If I've got an estate of 200-300 stores, trying to get a representative view of that at times can be difficult if everybody's doing the same thing slightly differently or calling it something slightly different. So for us, it's about having credible sample sets and data sets, but not having to go and look at every single part of the estate, because that's one, not feasible, and two, kind of too expensive to perform on both sides. So yeah, challenges for us around how do you hit the sweet spot of getting a good representative data sample.
Okay, so consistency. Is there anything else that you'd say falls outside of that?
When you start to then get into the data, I think, yeah, it's the same word, but from a data point of view. So there's consistency from a data capture point of view, but then within the data, when it comes back, there's consistency of data structure, data naming conventions, and all those other things I'm sure we'll kind of talk about as we get through the conversation.
Okay, so then for your sort of top tip for the business leaders would be really thinking about that consistency capture of data from like day one onwards, or when they're starting to think about doing more with their data. Consistency is key, so thinking that process through is your top tip, is it?
It's one of them. Yeah, I think 10 years in, if I'd know now what I knew when we started about data structure, and I'm no data expert or data scientist by any stretch, we'd have probably
Hmm.
made some really different decisions to start, because we've had to go on a big journey to get our data in a consistent format. Really,
Mm.
really, really streamlined now and a lot better moving forward. But looking back over our 10 years, and it's always a learning process in business. But yeah, if I'd have known the importance of moving from project to project, having naming conventions, columns with the same headers on, down to the point of, we have a column which is called BMS, which is basic minutes, for those that understand our kind of methodologies. On one spreadsheet, it might be B.M.S, on another, it might be BMS. So it's that
Hmm.
level of detail that then, when you try and piece it together in a world of big data and surfacing other insights, you think that's a real problem, because from a computer's
Hmm.
point of view, they're two separate things.
Okay. So it's sort of like from the challenges moving to the opportunities, what sort of opportunities have you created for yourself and others?
So I think for ourselves, it was around that point really of reflecting as we kind of approached probably 8 years as a business. What does our data look like? And we were really conscious it had evolved, and our insights had got much better, and our storytelling through the data had become really clear, and we got a really consistent way of producing visuals, albeit in PowerPoint at that moment in time. But the data behind still quite fragmented, or lots of manual work. So there was a moment in time of, okay, this is fine, but lots of effort after data capture to clean, streamline, format, get it consistent. How there must be a smarter way to do it, right? So we spoke
Hmm.
to you guys, and you helped us on some of that journey, which was really good. But there was lots of work we still had to do. First point being, get everything in a standard format. Well, that's fine when you've got 6-7 million data points. It's like, oh, that's a big job. But as ever, you find a rhythm and routine, and kind of get through it. So getting everything in one standard format, and then making sure that when we've when we're capturing data in the future, it's in that format, and we can flex and add things if we start to capture more data, but we can expand that format in a controllable way. But also, how do we check that data ongoing? How do we cleanse that data? And then how do we pass that data through to somewhere where it all sits in a consistent format, that then we can start to pull the visuals from, then we can start to maybe benchmark from, we can start to maybe in the future add AI, machine learning, the weather data, footfall data, sales data. So almost, let's get our foundation solid,
Hmm.
then we can start to do all the cherry on the top of the cake stuff, and all the, what I'd say was exciting stuff, and all the things
Hmm.
that consciously we can't get out at the moment.
And what's been the most exciting learning for you or implementation you've sort of discovered in your data journey?
Um, I think the most reassuring thing was that a lot of the insights we were providing, when you kind of get all that data together in one set, were really great. We're in the right, pointing in the right direction. I think the most exciting thing was there's so much more we can build on with other
Hmm.
data sets, and by
Yeah.
automating some of that journey, so we've kind of moved, I suppose, our journey's gone from gathering data, being a company that gathers data, to being a company that provides some insight, to now we want to be a company that's telling stories. So this is
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
productivity story, and then you come back to us, say, can you capture some up-to-date data on that, and we kind of just move to the next chapter of the story. So
Mm,
for me, the most exciting bit, I think, well, the most painful bit was getting it all in one format. Let's not shy
of
away from
course.
that. The most exciting thing is the opportunity that now opens up. I think that's the key bit.
Yeah, great. Getting insight beyond what your gut feel is or what your feedback is from softer measures. Okay. So then thinking about what the biggest opportunities are, what would you say, is it sort of different for yourself to your clients that you're working with? Or is it kind of just one of the same?
Um, I think there's subtle differences. So for us, it's around being more streamlined with data, being more consistent with it, automating. So how can we get to those stories quicker with less manual intervention?
Hmm.
Um, I think for our clients, it's then, is there a different service where there's an online benchmarking capability they can come and access to benchmark their processes, as we just feed more data in an anonymized way? So
Mm.
that's kind of base count one. And then there's kind of, I suppose, level two, which is, so what other data could we bring in to make correlations? So
Yeah, sure.
is people's productivity more on hot days, cold days, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, manager's day off, when customers are happier? colleagues doing specific things or not doing specific things. And then, the ultimate aim is, so what are all the things that if we pass AI algorithms, machine learning algorithms over it, what are the things that they can unearth that our brains aren't even possible of thinking about or coping with?
Great. So it's sort of good that you can share your experience, but as well, the sort of the opportunities around less with your client base as well. But it all comes down to getting it in one place, somewhere that you can understand it and go from there.
For us, absolutely, yeah. It was that, and I'm sure everyone's been there. We had a good filing cabinet, if you like, in Google. We use Google Drive of projects and Excel spreadsheets, and all that was in a great place, in a nice structure. But actually, it was all in separate folders and all in a slightly different format, albeit in Excel. So taking that, we kind of got our own software to capture the study data, so that helps us now in the future. We'll be consistent and quality assure and assess that data, but also to pass it then through to the kind of data warehouse to sit in a consistent place.
Okay, so what tools have you been using then to get this data into a useful shape?
So first protocol was Excel. Everyone loves an Excel spreadsheet. So Excel we'd used historically, and that's the tool we used to get everything in a standard format. So working with you guys, we decided everything was going to go into AWS, so Amazon Web Services, in a particular format and structure. So again, start point was none of your old data's in that structure. So go away, do that. We then, prior to kind of the data warehousing piece, we developed, as I say, our own apps to capture the data that pulled all new data into a web platform. So again, then it was making sure we could transfer that automatically via an interface into AWS. Then the third bit was just keeping an eye on the future of, so what happens if in the future we wanted to do something different or capture more data? How easy is that to set up and to pass through, and to make sure we're not going to have to, historically go back? So that was the kind of journey we went on. And then we've connected the kind of big database into tools like Power BI, played with Tableau, looked at some of the online benchmarking tools and data design tools to see on the next step of the journey, how can we get to more of the visuals quicker if we've got all this data in standardized kind of columns and formats and naming conventions.
Yeah. And how would you say your investment in data has changed the business, if at all?
It's certainly a long-term journey for us. It's the reality, because of our start point being so manual. So what the investment's meaning is we can spend less time triaging data, playing with data, and more time thinking about stories. So we've shifted our focus really of, if we've set up the projects well, we brief the teams well, we spend less time playing with data in the middle and more time creating visuals, thinking about the story to maybe create deeper cuts of visuals of, this looks like an interesting piece of data that's come through. What happens if we do a deep dive in this region, this area, this day, this month, this role?
Yeah, sure. And then obviously the tech is just the start of that journey. How have you sort of managed the transformation of the culture, or getting everyone on board with that sort of data management process to make sure that you've got the outputs you can trust?
So a lot of education with the teams that go out and gather the data. So lots of why it's important that we kind of work in this format and this framework. The apps really help us because that gives us structure. So that gives us structure to capture the data. And also, as part of our project process, we've got a kind of the project manager that will manage the project, but then we've also got a data quality control person who will check the data alongside. So we've introduced kind of a second data check to make sure before that data passes anywhere, we've weeded out outliers or things that maybe we need to go back to the analyst just to clarify, is that exactly what you saw, or actually was it coded incorrectly?
Okay. And then just more broadly thinking about the sort of the SME landscape, and lots of businesses out there that have lots of data but perhaps aren't doing a lot with it. What would be a good starting point, would you suggest, from your experience? And if you started again now, where would you start? obviously consistency is that part that you mentioned.
Yeah,
I've
start
got a
with
feeling that comes up again.
start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So difficult if you don't almost know the direction you're going, but have a clear structure of data for the data that you know you're going to use or will have
Mm.
at the start point. And also just think about if that data expands, whether it's new columns of data, new metrics, how easy is that to scale and keep in that consistent format.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rely on Excel for everything. It is a good
Mm-hmm.
tool, and I think you can certainly for a small or medium business, because you buy Office and it's there for free. Once you've bought it, it's reassuring, but actually
Mm-hmm.
becomes difficult to piece things together. And as people come and go in organisations, spreadsheets get lost or corrupted or um,
Mm.
changed, and you don't know. So thinking about that journey, consistency of data, using experts. So if you're good
Mm-hmm.
at something, that's why people come to you and use you to do your work. But actually, there's people like yourselves that are great at data and architecture and understanding the landscape. So
Mm-hmm.
use them, because you can, it's like anything, you can Google anything, but you get so many contradictory
Yeah.
responses that you kind of don't know where you stand. So yeah, use
Mm-hmm.
experts, have a good structure with the start in mind, but also being able to be flexible as your data journey expands or changes.
Sure. And do you have any sort of challenges from clients in terms of trusting data? Those clients that may not have been sort of familiar, or sort of it may be a new concept to them around that buy-in piece?
We do lots of work up front with our clients if they're new to the kind of data we provide, to make sure we're going to deliver the outputs they're expecting. So the
Mm-hmm.
things and the timings and the insights and stories that will help them. Clearly, we don't know what the answer is, but we want to make sure
Mm.
we're showing them examples of previous studies or examples of typical outputs. So for us, that education is always at the start, because it's easier to then change or morph the project and tweak the project into a place which delivers answers to questions they have or hypotheses they have. It's very
Mm.
difficult at the end if you come back and they say, that's great, but can you split that data down to the next level? As ever,
Yeah,
it's always
sure.
easier to aggregate up than work down.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you find the most sort of the most beneficial way of demonstrating that? Is it kind of dashboards across the business so that the relevant people have got the relevant information for their roles, or is there a better way to do it?
We have quite a small team internally, so we tend to share the outputs across our team. For customers, we'll break it down into areas that are important to them. So typically there'll be
Mm.
kind of exec summary and overview, and then we'll do, depending on the types of studies we've done and the audience, because sometimes we'll do different playbacks to different groups in an organisation. We'll do some deep dives into the areas that are important to them. But again,
Mm-hmm.
as part of the study setup, we want to understand, who will be coming to the playback sessions, what are their roles, what's important to them, so
Mm-hmm.
people don't get drunk or punch drunk by all the data, because you can
Yeah, yeah,
you can swim in it and it's almost kind of like the so what. So it has to be
yeah.
tailored for us to the audience, and then the questions that they kind of want answering.
Hmm. And how do you then bring on board sort of the softer measure that might sit around that to sort of get that sort of full balanced presentation of information? So you've got sort of the data that's kind of part of it, but then you've got lots of other information across the business, lots of different opinion. And how do you sort of get it to that one point? Whereas, this is the recommendation, this is the so what and why.
So we tend to have the kind of data-driven elements. We then have
Hmm.
as I talked about before, the anecdotal elements and the photos or the commentary from the team that have been studying, which brings a kind of different colour and flavour to it. And then we'll pull that together in almost a next steps, because like you say, the question is always, this data tells me this, so what? So
Yeah.
the so what is here are maybe the top 10 things to go after. This is what the data is telling us, this is what our benchmark data is telling us, therefore this is the opportunity. Or we've
Mm.
worked with other organizations that had this problem and found these four things or these four areas of focus help them get the biggest benefit. And then
Hmm.
potentially we'll go back when they've implemented that to say, it was 2 minutes to do this, you've done this and this step, now it's 1.4 minutes, well done. And actually here's a bunch of other stuff to think about, now you've got to the next level of process.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing, Simon. I think that just one last question is what's next?
What's next? Good question. So
Mm.
we're kind of at that point now. So we've got the data in one place. It is that what things subconsciously, don't we know? So how can we overlay other bits of data from clients, whether that be sales, whether customer satisfaction, delivered items, whatever it might be, that again it's important to them and they track, to make the story more colourful and add more chapters to it. So we've got one view, if that makes sense. It's how do we make that view 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional with other bits of data, and then by adding that, what correlations does that tell us that reinforce the story to date or actually give us a new direction?
Great. And then for others, any other sort of thoughts on the broader landscape of for SMEs and what they can be doing for the future? Obviously now maybe it's the time they're starting, but as they sort of progress, where do you see that going for the SME industry?
I think, all streamlined, lots of automation, so little kind of intervention from the point of data capture, whatever data that might be that you're capturing, through to a tool which brings to light the analysis and the insights in a visual way, in a kind of tabular way. So it's, for me, it's that whatever data you're capturing, it's the quality of capture at the start, whether that's be automated data or somebody physically capturing data, but how quickly can you get to the story, but then always challenging yourself of, so what things don't I know, what things would add flavour and richness to that. And that for us is those other data sources, and computers being far more intelligent than humans and working a lot quicker, of surfacing those bits to then think about.
Great. So knowing what questions that you want to answer, and then sort of working out where the data is coming from in order to help support that. That's great. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us at such an exciting time for your business. Thank you very much.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.